Okay, so this is a piece of DNA, and each of these things that form the rung of the ladder is a pair of bases. So there's one base there, there's one base there. You should be taking notes in some way. You are going to have a recall quiz over DNA and genes and chromosomes today before you leave. Okay, so we've got this piece of DNA here. And do you notice that certain bases only connect to other certain bases? And a lot of it has to do with the way they're actually physically shaped. They're actually structured in such a way that they can only partner with particular other bases. So what we have are A and T that pair with one another, and C and G that pair with one another. And A is called adenine. So A is called adenine, T is called thymine. Those two pair up. C is actually stands for cytosine, and G stands for guanine. And guanine always makes me think of bat poop. Why? What's bat poop called? Guano. Yeah. So guanine always makes me think of bat poop. So they only partner in those particular ways. They physically can only form that kind of linkage. And this is how we get that pattern to make the other side of the molecule. So what I've given you are some little scraps of paper that have one base on them. Okay? Now, you may not have matches for all of your bases. You may not have matches for any of your bases. Your job is to find other people who can, with you, create base pairs. So you need to match all of your bases. I'm going to add a few to the mix as you go. So you can move around, get started. Okay, so you just built a giant strand of DNA. You've got two sugar phosphate backbones. Connecting them, you have these bases, and they only, and we didn't staple one of them, that's okay. They only pair in one particular way. I'll staple quickly. And this makes a template for how, oh, we got one stray base that didn't get paired. Do we have another stray base out there? Oh, you got a bunch of bases that you didn't pair. Okay. Okay. That's okay, don't worry about it. So we've got this long structure, and that's going to form a template for the next piece of DNA. Now, just to review, because I think there's some misunderstanding about the terms. So the strand of DNA is that twisted ladder. We take that ladder and we twist it. You very often see it looking like that. That long strand is all wrapped around a piece of protein to keep it neat. So remember, you made your chromosomes. Okay? So, which is the bigger structure? Which involves more stuff? DNA or a chromosome?
DNA.
Chromosome. So DNA is part of a chromosome. A chromosome involves DNA and a protein. So let's do this in the order that we... Okay, good. So we have T and A and G and C and G and C and A and T and A and T and T and A. And that's DNA. And one section of that DNA is a gene. And you should remember this from the video. A gene can be 5 letters long, it can be 100 letters long. But it's a section of that longer DNA molecule. So then we have that really long DNA molecule. And let's see, these are base pairs, and then we have an individual gene, we have that whole DNA molecule, and then we have that piece of protein that has the DNA wrapped all around it. There's our chunk of protein, and there's the DNA just coiled around it. I always spell protein wrong. Never fails. Does that look right? Yeah, that's right. It's seriously a word that in all my life I've never once just instantly known how to spell it. It just throws me every time. You should be taking notes on this. And this entire structure, the DNA and the protein, okay, so we've got base pairs that make up the DNA, and little sections of that DNA are genes. The DNA is the whole big thing. The chromosome is the protein that's wrapped in the DNA. So the one word that somebody brought up that we haven't talked about is allele. What's an allele? How does an allele fit into all this? Because that's the idea back from genetics. So if we look at this gene, I'm going to shrink this, and then, oops. So I'm going to, I didn't get everything there. I'll copy this whole thing. I'm going to shrink it. I'm going to paste this. So if you look very carefully at this gene, let's say that in this one location, we'll make this some other color, we'll make this a nice bright orange. In this one location, there's one version of this gene that has a CG and one version that has a TA. They're the same gene, everything else is the same, but there's one letter that's different between the two of them. But they code for the same thing. Maybe one of them codes for a protein that's shaped this way, and one of them codes for a protein that's shaped just slightly differently. This could be a gene for curly hair. Curly hair is created because of the shape of the hair shaft. So maybe, you know, that one letter difference means the hair shaft is triangular versus round. These two variations are alleles. So they're variations of a single gene. And sometimes, a lot of times the differences are much bigger than that. But, you know, I'm really oversimplifying that. So the alleles are variations of that single gene. Does that make sense? Okay. Questions so far? So, base pairing, the complementary base pairs. What are alleles versus DNA versus genes versus chromosomes? And you should have gotten a lot of this from the videos yesterday, 2 days ago. This is kind of to brush you up a little bit. So what I'd like you to do when you finish up writing the notes that you're writing currently is I want you to go to PBWorks and I want you to take the quiz that is linked there. Cell's DNA is stored how? DNA is wrapped around pieces of protein in the form of chromosomes. Yes, ma'am. No, that's... A gene is, and again, we just talked about this, it's a section of your DNA, it's a section of all that DNA that codes for a particular thing. The base pairs, it was all of the above. They match up in only a particular way. They're A, T, C, and G. I had to change that. They do provide a pattern for copying. You did this process, so it's all of the above. A matches to T. This next one was the most missed question. This is about chromosomes. So this goes back to something we talked about last week. It's been a little while, but remember we looked at those karyotypes? We looked at... Let me pull up a karyotype here. These, picture of all the chromosomes in an organism. All of these chromosomes, every cell in your body has 2 copies of each one, because you got one from your mama, you got one from your papa. There's one type of cell in an organism that doesn't have 2 copies, which is what? The gametes. Because if you had 2 cells that you're going to fuse together to make one new creature, whether that creature is a human or a maple tree or a butterfly or a blue whale or a grasshopper or an earthworm, it's going to get double the number of chromosomes it should have. And that means it can't survive because there are too many sets of instructions to follow at once. So that was the most missed question on the whole quiz. Pardon? Yeah, every cell in your body except gametes has 2 copies of each chromosome. The gametes have 1 copy of each chromosome. So your gametes confuse with somebody else's gametes and make an individual who gets 2 copies of each chromosome. The last one, and this one was also the other one that was missed a lot. A cell from your liver and a cell from your cheek. Do they have the same DNA? Yes. So every cell in your body, again, except those gametes because they only have half your DNA, every cell in your body has the same DNA. So if you commit some crime or somebody commits a crime, every cell, if we can find a piece of their skin flaked off, if we can find a piece of hair, if we can find a drop of blood, if we can find, any bit of them, we can identify them because every cell in your body has all the same DNA. Now, every cell in your body and every cell in my body have different DNA. We share the normal amount that humans share, which is like 99.99. But, Brandon and, I pointed at Noah and said Brandon. Brandon and Noah have their own DNA. So Brandon's liver cell DNA is going to be different than the DNA in a liver cell from Noah. Okay? So that's the thing I really want you to understand. And now in the last few minutes we've got left, I'd like you to go into the air practice test. So what they're saying here, they've got all these different cells they took tissue from someone's liver, lung, muscle, and blood in person A, and then liver, skin, muscle, and pancreas in person B. Which prediction would be supported by the results of the DNA analysis, the gel electrophoresis analysis? The answer is B. We will pick it up on Monday. Have a wonderful weekend.